With a massive Milwaukee Bucks trade update to go over today, as a brand new report has dropped revealing some huge new details surrounding the Bucks' pursuit of Zach LaVine. We're going to break down those reports and discuss what this means going forward as the Bucks are preparing for something big. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we get into it, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. If you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Bucks content. Bear with the background, bear with the setup and all those things because I am traveling right now, so I'm recording from a hotel room, but we'll be back to our normal setup on Monday. Thank you guys again for your continued support. It means the world to myself. But there's a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks have been heavily involved in talks with, we initially thought, Bradley Beal, the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes, and now Zach LaVine, as numerous reports have started to drop. And things are now starting to get extremely interesting surrounding Zach LaVine to the Milwaukee Bucks. There's a new report that dropped right here, and it says Zach LaVine trade interest, Middleton could be moved, deadline hopes from Jeremy Hanna. And it basically goes on to say, according to a recent report, the Bucks have shown interest in acquiring two-time All-Star Zach LaVine from the Bulls. In 40 games this season, LaVine's averaged 24, 5, and 5 and a steal. In the same vein, Milwaukee has stated they are open to moving three-time All-Star Chris Middleton. The good news is that they now, there are plenty of teams that are interested in Middleton. So there's a couple things to go over here. Obviously, the Bucks initially were interested in what we thought was Bradley Beal. Chris Haynes came out and said that isn't the case and that wasn't really what's going on. They actually aren't and have zero interest in acquiring Bradley Beal in a three-team trade to help facilitate Jimmy Butler to the Suns. But what they are interested in doing, we have a couple mock trades here to go over and proposed trades from some analysts and writers and reporters, is that reporters are saying that the Bucks are interested in, of course, Zach LaVine. And Zach LaVine makes a whole lot more sense than Bradley Beal ever did. Bradley Beal is, of course, making $50 million a year playing not great basketball at this point. And, of course, now you have Zach LaVine, who makes a lot more sense. Now, there's also been the report that we're going to cover here is that they've been interested in, of course, the Bucks are open to moving Chris Middleton, and that's been the biggest thing that has come out. The Bucks are willing to move and willing to ship off of Chris Middleton in a potential trade for whether it be Zach LaVine or in general. And for a while, they were saying they were going to keep Zach LaVine. John Horst said Chris Middleton is going to be the guy who, he's going to stay on the team. But now the report is coming out saying, okay, we're open to moving Chris Middleton. Now, that's probably because he hasn't been playing great this season. The Bucks probably are starting to realize, and we know watching the games, they probably need another piece. Now, whether that be shipping off Middleton, who's been coming off of the bench, Bobby Portis, who is actually sitting out of tonight's game with rest. Now, that could be a culmination of him actually being injured, him needing rest, or it could be a trade is brewing for, of course, the Bulls. To acquire Zach LaVine, or just a trade in general with the Milwaukee Bucks. There's a lot of different avenues here now that could be happening because of this deal. Now, that being said, the fact that Chris Middleton's open in trade talks changes a lot for the Bucks because he's obviously the biggest salary matcher that the Bucks have. He's been averaging 12, 5, and 3. We know this season he hasn't been great. He's been having turnover problems. He's been having problems facilitating. That being said, when you look at what the Bucks could use, and I want to start with this trade, and there's a couple we're going to go over here, but things start to get very interesting. Here's what a deal could look like, and this would be, of course, matching salary. So it'd be Zach LaVine for Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, a second, another second, and another second. And, of course, the Pistons would receive Pat Connaughton. So this is super interesting now. And, obviously, the Bucks are giving up their 2031 second-round pick. There's some second-round picks going to the Bulls as well. But the framework here, I'm not going to worry about the picks too much, is Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, and a second-round pick for Zach LaVine. For one, let me know down below, would you do this deal? It's a very intriguing one. It's a very interesting one. I'm not entirely sold on Zach LaVine being a phenomenal fit. I do think he's a much better fit than Bradley Beal because now you would have a starting lineup of Damian Lillard, Zach LaVine, Giannis, Brook Lopez, and of course, whoever you want to slide into that 3 spot, probably Taurean Prince. And you're getting a ton of scoring. Now, the Bucks, you're also getting rid of Bobby Portis here, and something to mention, I haven't been a big fan of Bobby Portis' game this season. He's been very poor defensively, but there is something to be said about, he's been the sixth man for this team, and he's been a really good scorer and rebounder, albeit sometimes not super efficient, albeit sometimes not super great. But you're getting rid of a key bench piece right now. And if you don't replace that, and you do have, of course, Zach LaVine, yes, you would be less pressed to actually, find more scores because, of course, Zach LaVine does a great job at that. But you'd also be struggling a little bit with your bench unit. Now, you do have A.J. Green. You have Gary Trent Jr. You have Andre Jackson Jr., who would also go to the bench now, you would assume, because Zach LaVine's coming in. So there's a few different things to be said about that. And again, Zach LaVine this season is having a fantastic year. One of the best years of his career, especially efficiency-wise. He's shooting 45% from 3, the highest he's ever shot, and that's in 7 attempts a game, which is obviously an incredible amount. And then, of course, regarding rebounding, assists, all these other things, he's been doing really well, and he doesn't turn over the ball a ton. 3 a game, it's still a fair bit, but again, given the fact that he's in the Bulls and he's the primary scorer, things start to get interesting. And of course, Bobby Portis is out for tonight's game, which is also super, I'm going to say, intriguing. It's interesting that this is the case at the moment. We're going to keep you up to date with that incoming trade tweets there. And we know Jimmy Butler, he said his list is anywhere but Memphis. So, I mean, maybe the Bucks are still working behind the scenes on a trade out of Memphis, out of Milwaukee, from Miami, out of Miami to Milwaukee if the Bucks are looking to go in that route. But we heard some conflicting reports, and they're still conflicting about whether or not Jimmy wants to be traded to, Milwaukee, and how Milwaukee wasn't on his team his list of teams he doesn't want to be traded to. There are some reports saying he is on, he doesn't want to go to Milwaukee. So that's still up in the air there. But again, as these reports continue to escalate and percolate, this is a very interesting trade. I mean, it would make your team better offensively. Defensively, you're not really taking a step back per se, because Chris Middleton and Bobby Portis are both pretty poor defenders at this point of their careers. Yes, Andre Jackson Jr. would factor out of the starting lineup, you would assume, which would make their defense as a whole and their starting five worse. But you could find ways to stagger in Andre Jackson Jr. with the starting five, with Zach LaVine, and in theory, you'd be able to maybe have some better defensive lineups out there, because you wouldn't have to keep Dame on the floor at all times to help mitigate the scoring drop off when Giannis Antetokounmpo is out. You wouldn't have to compensate a ton, because when Giannis is out right now, they had to have Dame Lillard on there, or else the offense goes really poor. With Zach LaVine, it gives you more options to kind of swap out these guys, and of course have different rotations. Now, another trade, and this is from a report, there's a potential 5-team Jimmy Butler trade framework making the rounds today. Suns get Jimmy Butler, Bucks get Zach LaVine, the Bulls get Bradley Beal and draft capital, the Heat get Middleton, assets, and draft capital. The facilitator, a team like the Raptors, with unwanted salaries plus draft capital. So this is a similar framework. I think in any framework for Zach LaVine, it is going to be a part of a Jimmy Butler trade, and this makes a ton of sense. Now, Chris Middleton plus the additional assets would probably be Bobby Portis in this case, because the Heat are still trying to win. Bobby Portis could be a valuable asset for them. You have Chris Middleton, and then maybe say they get 1, 2, or maybe even 3 first-round picks from Phoenix. And then if you're the Bucks, you're giving up Middleton, Bobby Portis, and again, it would be a similar framework to that of which we showed here with the second-round pick. Now, we know the Bucks only have their 2031 second-round pick to give up at this point. And that's why this trade makes some sense, because when you're facilitating a 5-team trade or any other, amount of team trade, you don't have to have a ton of draft capital at this point. The Bucks are helping facilitate this trade, and if you're the Bulls, you're getting some draft capital out of Zach LaVine while also getting Bradley Beal to help them contend if they are trying to continue to be a mediocre team in the East. The Suns get Jimmy Butler for the picks, and of course the facilitator, a team like the Raptors, would take in unwanted salary while also getting picks because they're not competing this season. So a lot of reports are circulating, a lot of reports are percolating, and honestly, the Bucks could end up getting Jimmy Butler in these talks. That is still not completely out of the question, although Zach LaVine at this point seems like the most likely outcome and the most obvious suitor for the Bucks, not Bradley Beal. Chris B. Haynes came out and said that's not going to happen. It makes no sense. And honestly, we said at the time, unless you're getting a first-round pick back, if you're the Bucks and you're getting Bradley Beal and a first, sure, help recuperate some of the first you lost in the Dame trade and things like that. But when it comes to Zach LaVine, it makes a ton more sense, and I think it's going to be he would be a beast if he came to the Milwaukee Bucks. That'll wrap it up. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.